12. Military organization and mercenary troops. Having discussed in detail all the characteristics of the principalities I listed to start with, and having to some extent considered the reasons why they prosper or fail, and shown the methods often used to acquire and retain them, it now remains for me to discuss in general the various ways in which these principalities can organize themselves for attack or defense. We said above that a prince must build on sound foundations, otherwise he is bound to come to grief. The main foundations of every state, new states as well as ancient or composite ones, are good laws and good arms. And because you cannot have good laws without good arms, and where there are good arms, good laws inevitably follow, I shall not discuss laws, but give my attention to arms. Now I say that the arms on which a prince bases the defense of his state are either his own, or mercenary, or auxiliary, or composite. Mercenaries and auxiliaries are useless and dangerous. If a prince bases the defense of his state on mercenaries, he will never achieve stability or security. For mercenaries are disunited, thirsty for power, undisciplined, and disloyal. They are brave among their friends and cowards before the enemy. They have no fear of God. They do not keep faith with their fellow men. They avoid defeat just so long as they avoid battle. In peacetime, you are despoiled by them, and in wartime, by the enemy. The reason for all this is that there is no loyalty or inducement to keep them on the field, apart from the little they are paid, and this is not enough to make them want to die for you. They are only too ready to serve in your army when you are not at war, but when war comes, they either desert or disperse. I should have little need to labor this point, because the present ruin of Italy has been caused by nothing else but the reliance placed on mercenary troops for so many years. Although there were times when some made good use of them, and they appeared brave enough when matched against other mercenaries, when the foreigner invaded Italy, they showed themselves for what they were. So it was that Charles, King of France, was able to conquer Italy with his billeting officers alone. And he who said that the reasons for this were our own sins was telling the truth. But they were those I have described, not the sins he thought. As they were sins committed by princes, they too have paid the penalty for them. I want to show more clearly what unhappy results follow the use of mercenaries. Mercenary commanders are either skilled in warfare or they are not. If they are, you cannot trust them, because they are anxious to advance their own greatness, either by coercing you, their employer, or by coercing others against your own wishes. If, however, the commander is lacking in prowess, in the normal way he brings about your ruin. If anyone argues that this is true of any other armed force, mercenary or not, I reply that armed forces must be under control of either a prince or a republic. A prince should assume personal command and captain his troops himself. A republic must appoint its own citizens, and when a commander so appointed turns out incompetent, should change him, and if he is competent, it should limit his authority by statute. Experience has shown that only princes and armed republics achieve solid success, and that mercenaries bring nothing but loss, and a republic, which has its own citizen army, is far less likely to be subjugated by one of its own citizens than a republic whose forces are not its own. Rome and Sparta endured for many centuries armed and free. The Swiss are strongly armed and completely free. The Carthaginians provide an example of reliance on mercenary arms in ancient times. They were very nearly subjugated by their mercenary troops after the first war with the Romans was over, even though their own citizens held the positions of command. After the death of Epaminondas, the Thebans put Philip of Macedon in command of their army, and when he had won a victory, he robbed them of their liberty. After the death of Duke Filippo, the Milanese hired Francesco Forza to soldier for them against the Venetians, and when he had defeated the enemy at Caravaggio, he joined forces with them in order to subjugate his employers, the Milanese themselves. Forza, his father, after being hired by Queen Joanna of Naples, deserted her without warning and left her defenseless. So to save her kingdom, she was compelled to throw herself on the mercy of the King of Aragon. Admittedly, the Venetians and the Florentines have in the past used mercenary arms to extend their power, and their commanders have fought to defend them, without, however, seizing the state. But my comment on this is that here the Florentines happen to have been lucky. As for the good commanders likely to cause them anxiety, one has failed to achieve military success, one has been checked in his designs, another has directed his ambition elsewhere. Giovanni Acuto was the one who proved unsuccessful, and, as that was so, his loyalty could not be put to the test. But everyone will admit that if he had been successful in battle, the Florentines would have been in his power. The Forzas always had the Bracceschi against them, and they held each other in check. Francesco directed his ambition towards Lombardy, Braccio against the Church and the Kingdom of Naples. But let us have a look at what happened a little while ago. As their commander, the Florentines appointed Paolo Vitelli, a very shrewd man who, starting modestly, achieved considerable standing. Had he taken Pisa, the Florentines would undeniably have had to fall in with his wishes, because if he had gone over to their enemies, they would have been powerless against him, and keeping him in their service meant that they had to obey him. If the expansion of Venice is considered, it will be seen that the Venetians won glory for themselves and remained secure when they made war with their own forces. This was before they started to campaign on the mainland. With their own patricians and citizen army, they displayed the greatest prowess. But when they started to fight on the mainland, they lost this prowess and fell in with the military traditions of Italy. When they first started to acquire territory on the mainland, they did not have much to fear from their commanders, as their dominions were still very limited and their standing was considerable. But when they expanded, with Carmagnola as their commander, they tasted the error of their ways. They had seen the great prowess of which Carmagnola was capable, and under his leadership they had defeated the Duke of Milan. Then they perceived that he was only lukewarm in his conduct of the war, and they realized that he would win no more battles for them, but they could not afford to dismiss him, lest they lost what they had acquired. So for safety's sake, they were forced to kill him. They then appointed as their commanders Bartolomeo da Bergamo, Roberto da San Severino, the Count of Pitigliano, and men such as these, and when they were in command, the question was whether the Venetians could hold on to what they had, rather than whether they could hope for new gains. Such was the position at Veala, where, in one day's engagement, they lost what it had taken them 800 years' exertion to conquer. Mercenary armies bring only slow, belated, and feeble conquests, but sudden, startling defeat. Since these examples have brought me to Italy, which for so many years has been dominated by mercenary arms, I would like to discuss them more thoroughly. If their origins and development have been made clear, it will be easier to provide a remedy. You must realize that as soon as in more recent times, Italy started to repudiate the empire, and the standing of the papacy became higher in the temporal sphere, the country split into several states. What happened was that in many of the big cities there were uprisings against the nobles who had formerly, with the backing of the emperor, held them in subjection, and the church, in order to increase its temporal authority, supported these revolts. In many other cities, one of the citizens became prince. So Italy came to be almost entirely under the control of the church and some few republics, and then, as the priests and townsmen had no experience in military matters, they started to hire foreign troops. The first to win a standing for this kind of army was Alberigo de Conia of Romagna. From his school came, among others, Braccio and Forza, who in their time were the masters of Italy. Then there followed all those other mercenaries up to our own times, and the result of their prowess has been that Italy has been overrun by Charles, plundered by Louis, occupied by Ferdinand, and outraged by the Swiss. It has been the policy of these mercenaries first to detract from the military standing of infantry in order to increase that of their own troops. They did this because, as they were stateless men soldiering for money, leadership of a few infantry troops did not give them any standing, while they could not provide adequately for large numbers. So they had recourse to cavalry, and in this way they were honored and adequately provided for, while needing only tolerable numbers. Things came to such a pass that in an army of 20,000 soldiers, there would be hardly 2,000 infantry. Beyond this, they directed all their efforts to ridding themselves and their soldiers of any cause for fear or need of exertion. Instead of fighting to the death in their scrimmages, they took prisoners without demanding ransom. They never attacked garrison towns by night, and if they were besieged, they never made a sortie. They did not bother to fortify their camps with stockades or ditches. They never campaigned in winter. All these things were permissible under their military code, and this policy was followed by them so that, as I said, they might escape both exertion and danger. And as a result, they have led Italy into slavery and ignominy.